Welcome into Eye.Talk.Tech, where we explore the intersection of eye care and technology. And two gentlemen I'm very excited to be joined with here today to discuss a couple topics on that front. First off, we have Dr. Hansra, returning guest of the show here. He is the Vice President of Professional Affairs for Topcon Health. And Dr. Alan Glazier is here as well, another visionary in this space, and excited to get your input on all this as well. So you're the founder of Shady Grove Eye Care. Odie's on Facebook, Fluorescene Media. We could go on all day, probably, but we better ask a group a question or two. First off, how are you doing at the show down here in Phoenix in June through it all?
Yeah, the show is absolutely amazing. The weather's fantastic, and now the turnout has been absolutely incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alan, doing well?
Except for the heat. The heat is brutal. I've been here before and it was brutal. I forgot how brutal it is. It's harder on your age, but yeah, it's what was it, 110 in the shade?
We were cooking a little bit, but being from Minneapolis, St. Paul, I tend not to complain about weather.
Sure.
I know what we have coming in a couple months.
You sound like our grandparents when we do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly right. So, well, in terms of what we're exploring with TopCon and so forth here, I think maybe to set the stage, I want to go back before where we are in current day and here. Maybe what got both of you excited about eye care and technology and start there.
Yeah, thank you for that. Started off in a 7-year accelerated dent program at Marquette University, and decided dentistry really wasn't for me. Was lucky enough to get into Illinois College of Optometry, and things just kind of started from there. I'll never forget my first day during orientation. Scott Jens, who obviously is the founder of Revolution EHR and a good friend of mine, Scott had actually came in and did a talk for all the first years and during orientation. And part of the first year orientation, he talked about, us going into clinic and seeing diabetic patients and hypertensive patients and helping diagnose those patients. And I thought I was here for glasses and contact lenses and maybe cataracts and glaucoma. I was not really aware, as a, 19, 20-year-old of the, that really eye care is healthcare. And that was very interesting to me. Kind of was a little intimidating at the time, but then going through, I think, which is a very rigorous clinical program, at the Illinois Institute, which was fantastic. Spent some time, about 9 years, seeing patients. And I think what I got motivated was just driving change. And so I'd always try to kind of figure out ways to deliver better quality of care, better experience, and grow the practice. And I had some success. But the next was, okay, how do I impact all three of those areas at a much more broader scale? So I took a position at Eye Exam of California. I helped run the Bay Area out there, and it was sort of a turnaround. That went extremely well. Found I sort of had a little bit of a knack for this, especially, finding the right talent, driving the culture, and things sort of progressed from there into strategy and operations and so on and so forth. And so I was lucky enough, probably in 2022, the CEO who is now the CEO of Topcon Healthcare, Alita Freshy, come to me and said, "You guys have 200 OCTs. What are you doing with all of the data?" And I said, "I don't know, but let's talk." So they came down to San Antonio. We had conversations about Oculomics and building a real world database, helping me better understand, how optometry is doing wellness screenings and how valuable those wellness screenings are. What I mean by that is, Griff, if you come to my office, I don't know if you have a disease or not in the back of your eye, but I'm just going to go ahead and take a fundus image, and then I'll determine it from there. So it's a real world population database that has been developed that then we can run these AI models and test and measure those AI models. So that was in 2022.
And now at that time in 2022, did anything like that exist?
No.
Yeah.
Nothing like that existed. I think that there was some conversations with the biobanks, in the UK, but then to be able to get different providers who may be unrelated to each other to then contribute into this giant data lake was something pretty new. And, I didn't know what it was going to lead to. And so at the time, I'd kind of heard about a glaucoma clinical decision support dashboard. But then to think about what that has turned into, diabetes, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, kidney disease, preeclampsia, Now we start thinking about Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, obviously MS, myopia. It goes on and on and on and on. And now what about PTSD, ADHD, depression? That could all be diagnosed or screened for that opportunistically in our offices. So I couldn't be more thrilled to be a part of that transformation. And I'm actually very, very excited that, working with a gentleman like Elite Tafreshi, who happens to be at TopCon, which is dedicated to this. But that really starts with, someone's vision. And that is now, I think, expanded, not only the rest of, um, optometry in general, but I think outside the four walls of optometry, I think we're seeing general medicine, we're seeing cardiology, neurology, NEI, NIH kind of get very excited. The payers are getting very excited about that. And so I'm hoping, Alan, we can talk a little bit about your experience at the Alliance for Healthcare from the Eye sometime during this episode.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think a pivot right now that probably would make it sink is if we start talking about a subject that's near and dear to your heart, and that's the cardiovascular kidney metabolic syndrome. Can you tell us a little bit about it and then the framework for diagnosing this and things like that?
Yeah, and I think that all starts with, who are Americans seeing for their healthcare right now? We know that Americans, we've got a broken healthcare system, right? We spend more money on healthcare than any other developed nation, but we have of the worst outcomes. 6 out of 10 Americans have some type of chronic disease. It seems like Americans every year are continuing to get sicker and sicker. 1 out of 5 Americans has not seen their general physician in over 5 years, right? So that's the bad news. Now, the good news is that they're coming into our offices. They're much, much more likely to come into our offices than they are to see their general physician. So then that brings up the opportunistic, puts us in a unique position for opportunistic screening. So what if, at the point of care during a general eye exam, we're going to run a wellness retina screening, but what if we just added an AI model to that? And in 30 to 60 seconds, it prints out a report telling us whether to monitor, refer, or treat these patients. It kind of gives us a risk score to doing that. Well, now what we've done is we've sort of transformed the healthcare system into one that is much more accessible, affordable, and equitable. And that puts optometry like right at the front door. Now, if you think about this, the American Heart Association and the American College of Cardiology, back in about 2022 and 2023, what they're doing is they're not only just looking at cardiovascular disease, they're looking at cardiovascular disease, kidney disease, and metabolic disease, all kind of together as an interconnected syndrome. So when you have one of these diseases, it increases your risk for the other two. When you have two or more, it increase that kind of synergistically, and it increases the risk for an adverse outcome. So they have really set an agenda for the next several years to attack cardiovascular kidney metabolic syndrome. They have done some things that have been very interesting. One of them is, is the Delta Dental campaign. Go see your dentist and get screened for heart disease, because the same plaque that runs into your gums kind of goes into your heart. But what do we know about how likely Americans are to go see a dentist? The idea is great. We need to get more providers involved. But we are, again, in a much, much more unique position because patients and Americans would rather go see their optometrist than they probably would their dentist. They're much, much more likely to do that.
Well, not to diminish the utility of what you're talking about with plaque from the teeth, but I mean, we're in a unique position because of the eye itself, right? Being the only place in the body where we can, in a non-invasive manner, see the vasculature and just the power of a retinal image because of the part of the body that we're focused on, plus the opportunity to see patients. It's really teed up for us for success.
Yeah. And again, to your point, neurodegenerative diseases,
Yeah.
systemic diseases, we can see all of that. We can now image down to the micron level, which is, I mean, where else can you do that? And it's part of our natural workflow, to your point, of what we do. So they also are now promoting with chest CT scan. So a gated chest CT scan, which you would get at your cardiologist to test for coronary artery calcium, is one thing. But what about the other millions of chest CT scans that are being performed, during pulmonology examinations, oncology examinations, ER visits? What they're saying now is, look, we know that you're not looking for CAC. However, you've got a chest X-ray. It's okay. It's non-gated, but why not look for CAC while you're there opportunistically? So that is the example and the path that I think optometry can follow. So we have had conversations with the American Heart Association and the American College of Cardiology. As a matter of fact, at the JP Morgan Health Conference that was in San Francisco in January, they actually attended this. We've been having conversations with them along the way. Toku has a AI model called CLARE that is an FDA breakthrough status, not only for cardiovascular disease, but also for kidney disease with their MyKidney AI. But in this particular case, the conversation was around CLARE, which tests your 10-year risk score for atherosclerotic cardiovascular risk disease. So they're very, very interested in it. So we met, we talked about it. They're supportive. I mean, who would have thought, when I was in optometry school and Scott Jens is out there talking about how important the role we're playing. Now we're actually in the room with Stanford educated cardiologists. I mean, it's the coolest thing, and we're going to hear more and more about that. But then the question pops up, Roop, you came in, we did this test on you, and we see that you might be at higher risk for atherosclerotic cardiovascular risk disease. So what's next? Do I just inform you and then you go on your own? It's the wild, wild west. Do I send you to the cardiologist? And, Griff is the cardiologist. Whoa, I'm already, my subspecialty is very, very busy. I can't take a low level preventative statin therapy patient. Who do we go to? Right. Do we go to your primary care? Well, what do we know about healthcare deserts? 80% of US counties are in a healthcare desert. 1 out of 3 Americans lives in a healthcare desert. What next? Do we do a minute clinic? Do we then do a televisit, a telecardiology visit? Do we send, Dr. Glazier sends these patients to Quest Labs for a lipid workup? I don't know. But these were the care pathways that were discussed at the JP Morgan conference. And they all may be viable, but you can see how important a triage role eye care providers are going to play with cardiovascular risk disease.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of threads we could certainly pull on there, but are some of those questions you talked about the JP Morgan event, are some of those things, areas where the Alliance for Healthcare from the Eye is evaluating as well? And what is the Alliance for Healthcare from the Eye?
So the Alliance is a group of major corporations, everything from that to people who are in eye care who are at the top of their game, and they're organizing the strategies and the clinical acumen of the doctors, and they're pulling them together to see how can we make eye care connect with this whole system that Rube is discussing, and how are we going to make it more efficient? How are we going to have the data, not only the data sets, but how are we going to analyze this stuff from the eye to get that patient all the way through the system to get the care they need early in the game? And it's quite a privilege to be able to be involved with this as an optometrist, taking because eyes in healthcare is a big message that the AOA and everybody gets out there, the importance of an optometrist in this whole process. So now they're involving us. I think it's really important we step up and take advantage of this. When I had asked a question the other day to a company that was developing a technology that could look to the eye and pick up Alzheimer's. The question is, that's great. What do you do when you have that in your chair? What steps does the optometrist take for the next? Well, that's just one of the things that the Alliance is trying to figure out. What does this cadence look like? How do we involve everybody in the best interest of preventing disease?
Absolutely. Well, so we have the best minds, it sounds like, to a large degree, working on that to some degree. So some of the best minds are at least in the room there is encouraging.
Well, I will tell you who was in the room as well. I mean, you did a great job, giving the summary. And so we did have, government agencies that were in the room. It was the NEI, the NIH was in the room. We have cardiology, neurology was in the room, Mary Tyler Moore Foundation, American Diabetes Association, American Heart Association, their innovation committee was members were on there. Payers, chief medical officer of Microsoft, David Rue is in the room. But again, it was a consortium. So the alliance isn't about a device. It's not about one technology or a company in and of itself. It is an ecosystem that we're trying to build to get the providers to talk, to increase access, to create connected care networks, to lower healthcare costs, all at the same time. And just cardiovascular disease and stroke in general, the annual spend, I think that there was a study done 2022-ish. It was probably about $229 billion annually. That number is projected to grow by the year 2050 to $1.5 trillion, about more money than Elon Musk has, right?
For now.
Yeah, for now that is. So without intervention, that's what it's going to be. And could it bankrupt us? I don't know. But think about all these patients, 88% of US adults have cardiovascular kidney metabolic syndrome stage 1 or higher. We can play an important role in identifying those patients opportunistically, stratifying their risk, and then triaging these patients to ensure they get to the right provider at the right time. It's one thing to lower the healthcare costs for the government and for payers, but what about having an adverse cardiovascular event or a stroke? To me, as an individual, that's time off of work, that is also the financial stress and burden an unexpected doctor visit is going to play on me and my family, right? So there's so much good that can be done just making optometry the front door to the overall health or eye care in general.
And one of the things that they emphasized at this meeting, that I've been to 3 meetings now, and that keeps growing and getting even more important, is the Rural Health Transformation Initiative.
Wow.
You talk about $500 million. They're putting $50 billion into this in a hopes of having it help spread care throughout underserved populations. And I think that blew my mind. 50 billion?
1.5 trillion in 2050, and it is 229 billion in the year 2022. So can you expand a little bit, because I heard you're very active with the AOA. I heard John Himes talk about the rural initiative. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I was introduced to it through, I heard about it from John. I was introduced to it more at that meeting. So I really don't have any additional information. I was just blown away that that's going to get rolling, but I know the AOA is playing a role.
One things where I have a curiosity when you talk about this cross-disciplinary nature of something like the Alliance for Healthcare from the Eye is my experience is much more narrow focused with some of the stuff we have going on in our optometric world, and communication can be difficult at times. What is it like communicating across some of those wide gulfs? Is it as much of a challenge as I would presume?
I think it's going to be a huge challenge, and that's why we got to call it an ecosystem. I mean, when you're diabetic, and you go to your primary care doctor and they said, when's the last time you had an eye exam? Well, what do we know about diabetics? 1 in 4 have diabetic eye disease. A lot of them don't get these eye exams. And that's why you have like 9 million, is it about 9 million patients that are, diabetic? Maybe I think it's about 1.8 million have vision threatening diabetic retinopathy. What is the number one prevention for that? Go get an eye exam. And so 90% of that can be completely prevented if they go get an eye exam. But who is primary care referring these patients to right now? They're bypassing it. We don't have a relationship with primary care retina. They're sending these to an overly burdened retina. Does retina, I'm sorry to say this, want to see a $200 medical patient? No, not when they can see these, patients for surgical cases, other complex disease cases. Maybe they want to see the $2,000 injection patient. But for people like you and me, I would love to see a $200 medical patient. Like, that's my wheelhouse. And if they need a surgical consult or intervention, I'll refer them to the right provider at the right time. And with 40,000 optometrists, we can play a huge role in this and relieving that burden.
It's more efficient for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So
when you refer to retina, question for you, gentlemen. When you refer to retina, what is the average amount of time it takes to get them in?
Oh, it depends on what sort of referral it is, right? So if I'm getting someone in for a retinal detachment, I got someone in same day the other day, right? So which is we're fortunate we have pretty good connection with some of the Twin Cities organizations there. If I'm referring someone for advancing diabetic retinopathy or something like that, we're talking a couple weeks. We're not waiting months or something like that. So I would say overall, in my experience in my particular region, it's pretty good for the access that we have
No,
available.
it's really good.
My trick is to call the retina group and say, they're dilated already. Can you see them now? And we get them in. But I
That's a
would
good
say,
trick.
I would say for a regular follow-up thing at 2 months in our area.
That's what I've heard as well.
So
I've
more
heard
like
it's
couple
about
months, yeah.
I've heard it's about 2 months unless you have a connect, right? So if
Right.
you guys are picking up the phone and making the call, then obviously same day if it's an urgent case or an emergent case. But for the average person, if I make an
Yeah.
appointment, it could be a
Yeah.
couple of months before I get seen.
Oh yeah, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And there's another entranceway into that system. We just have to make it efficient, and we have to be able to get everybody on the same page. And at the meeting that I went to, the last meeting, which was the only one I went to in person, the CMO, the CMO was it of Microsoft, and me and the head of National Vision, we're all sitting talking about the challenges and putting stickies on a wall to solve this. So it was a fascinating group of people to interact with, and I learned so much from them.
Yeah.
So much.
Now you talked about CLARE a little bit. I want to hammer in on that a little bit more. So first of all, what is CLARE? Does this live at the software layer? Is this going to be integrated directly with hardware? Is it going to live on multiple types of hardware devices? And then just in general, where does Topcon fit into all of this?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So CLARE measures your 10-year risk score for atherosclerotic cardiovascular for atherosclerotic vascular disease. So handful to say. But it uses sort of the same risk calculators that is used as a gold standard. And so
Is it taking in a retinal image? Is that where we start?
yeah, so imagine there's 50 different biomarkers within the eye that it takes a look at. And 4.3 million retinal images have been taken and put into that algorithm itself. So it's a binary test, right? Either you have your risk score is higher than 7.5%, which means you may benefit from statin therapy, losing weight, diet, exercise, the whole 9 yards, GLP-1 agonist or SGL2 inhibitor, right? So maybe you will be benefit from that preventive. It gets you in the system early enough that it can lower your risk considerably. So will it tell you if you're going to have a heart attack in the next acute heart? No, won't tell you that. But there's all sorts of things that it's correlated to, such as, smoking plays a risk factor for that. I think it's your systolic blood pressure plays a risk for that. Your lipid panel, so on and so forth. So it's very, very accurate. The accuracy, last I checked, okay, so don't quote me on this. It's probably about 90%. Yeah, 90% plus or minus 2. Okay. So it's very accurate. Again, when we brought that to the AHA, they were very pleased with those results. It's going through FDA breakthrough status, and that'll be in your office. So in the FDA, and I don't want to talk too much about it, okay? I'm not an expert at that, and it's going through the process. But my understanding, the FDA is, there's an image capture protocol. And so there's a specific device that it would need to get FDA approved on the device. What happens once it gets approved with a fast follow, with other devices? Probably, if we can prove that the model is, commensurate in terms of the outcomes. But then that will bring up what's going to happen in the future. So not just CLARE, but what if you have, you want to screen for Alzheimer's or some of the other models? We might have panels in particular. So there may be a cardiometabolic panel. There may be a neurodegenerative panel. There may be a mental health panel. So imagine that. So you're going to, and if are they going to be connected to the particular device? Are you going to have to go on a website? So we're going to need what we call a data management platform or an abstraction layer, much like you have on your cell phone, right? So on your cell phone, the application that you have, if you have the ESPN app, for example, it's not connected to the hardware. It's connected to an in-between layer that we call the iOS, right? So you just kind of You go on there, you side click that button and you can download an application. You don't have to change the phone. So, for us as practitioners, the way I see it is more and more of these AI models are going to get approved. They'll be in our ecosystem. How do we action those in a way that's part of our natural workflow, not having us to take let's call it a 20-minute eye exam. Okay. I don't know, maybe a 20-minute eye exam. But we don't extend that out to a 60-minute eye exam. And then the exam price, because you're charging for each of these individual applications, that exam price goes up by 6-7x, right? So these are, AI is not cheap. So these are some of the problems that we have to tackle if you want to be able to run these panels together. So I don't think it's going to be dominated by one company. One company's not going to be developing the AI models. One company's not going to have the devices, and one company's not going to have the connected care build. I think it's got to be an entire ecosystem. And me, we all have to contribute to that.
Help shape that. Well, to that end, Alan, I didn't know this until today. Actually, I came across you have 7 patents that you've been involved in the computer science and ophthalmologic space. So I'm curious, just your perspective to put your future goggles on. What would you like to see emerge from this ecosystem if you could wave your magic wand and have it appear?
I think ultimately, from a technology standpoint, and it has nothing to do with my patents, but thanks for bringing it up. But
Well, it means you have a valuable perspective on
Yeah.
this front.
so I'm a big fan of decentralized AI, and I think that's the future of all AI. And as we've seen in our practices, and as we know in other areas in our industry, that when you have disparate systems, it slows everyone down. It costs everyone more money. It's just bad for healthcare. When we move in AI, and you're the AI expert, I mean, I know something about it, but in AI, we have an opportunity through the decentralized systems to have AI actually make one disparate system talk to the other, understand all their languages. And so all the effort they're making to bring it all together, I think the next big step in making this mainstream is the top company, the other companies that are working on those technologies, bringing in the market, getting all the professions on board, and then having them talk to each other. And I think that's my idea. I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, is that something that you would align with your, maybe inside
Absolutely.
eye? That
we
aligns.
cannot create this in silo and say, well, this is my data set. The data is only as valuable as if it can move.
Sure.
And if that data can move and be transportable, now all of a sudden we can action that data to exactly to your point.
And also, there's a lot of issues around companies out there who feel they may be excluded from this. With getting AI to sync everyone, everyone can participate with their varying technologies, and it can be a bit, because not every doctor is going to agree they like this or they're going to use that. But if they're able to sync on some level, then you'll get that data you need. So
Yeah, interoperability is huge. So
that's sort.
And so again, one of the reasons I gave up my practices to come over here is because of Harmony. So Harmony is our digital data management platform. It's a connected care network. And with Harmony, it integrates with over 100 different EMRs and over 200 different competitor devices. And this data lake, this real world database that sits in the Institute for Digital Health, that is completely open source. So it is not dominated by Topcon, and the 6 or 7 members, I don't know how many there are right now, that are part of the Data Access and Governance Committee. None of them work for Topcon. It's an international committee that if you have a project, either you're a pharma company, you're an AI developer, you want to test or model something, it's not going to take you 5 years and $10 million to get access to a database to grow it. You have it right here, and using Databricks, we create these workspaces for you to go ahead and test your models out. And so the data doesn't leave that, you kind of work within that. And your AI model doesn't get exposed to somebody else, the data providers. It kind of stays, within Databricks, which is pretty fantastic. So I asked our CEO, Lee Tafreshi, I'm like, why do you want to make this open source? Like our competitors can even have access to it. But his thing was, if you want to accelerate technology, you have to make things open source. You have to make it available for everybody. And who gets to benefit from that? The patients do, right? the patients do.
When I said decentralized, a lot of what I was thinking is open source and decentralization together. So yeah, that's huge and so important. And you look at the companies out there who've gone open source in the past 10 years, they've done better in general than the companies that are maintaining their little environment.
And there's some utility for the ecosystem too. So when you compare like iOS to Android being the open source equivalent there, Android runs on more devices, Linux runs on more devices than Windows, for instance. And so I think it'd be a good thing for the ecosystem and hopefully the development of things that ultimately help patients, like you said. So how did you grapple with going from, the more hands-on clinical role that you had and managing that? And was part of your motivation just the size of impact you felt you could drive through the influence that you guys are having in democratizing this technology?
Yeah, and let me be honest with everybody in this room here. I'm not like you clinically. I'm a very average clinical optometrist, and this is what makes all of this very exciting to me. So with these clinical decision support dashboards, imagine taking all these multimodal inputs, bathymetry, pressures, age, the view of the OCT, all this stuff, and we can create a clinical decision support dashboard for, let's say, glaucoma in particular. So, an average optometrist like myself, right? I get one of these. It's not telling me if somebody has glaucoma or not, but it tells me the risk of that. And it's a double click for me to then, okay, I got to pay a little bit more attention here and better understand, why is this patient being flagged as amber or red, for example. So, in that aspect, I think, for me as a leader and as an agent of change, that's the way I view myself, to help empower. And, somebody called it a force multiplier the other day.
Sure.
Being a force multiplier to allow even the average optometrist to be able to practice at a super high level, regardless of, I'm only seeing glaucoma. Like I have a glaucoma specialty practice. Makes the average person kind of level off quite a bit in a number of different areas. So, leadership for me and driving change for me has always been my vision. My personal vision that I would probably tell you I've had about for the past 15, 17 years now is I want to change optometry. And so the last third of my career, having this opportunity to help get this stuff across the finish line, I think has been my major motivation. I couldn't teach Griff or, you Dr. Glaze or anything clinically, but what I can do is I can help, motivate others to get them engaged and enrolled in this vision that we have.
Yeah. Well, I'll speak from my chair here. The work that you guys are doing is inspiring me in that realm, and we're obviously all excited about the technology in this room. But I think the way that you put it was well put. That it all comes back to helping patients. So that's the exciting thing for me. Is there anything on the slate we haven't hit on while we have Dr.
I don't think
Nunsley
so.
here?
I think it's really, I'm really happy to hear that Roop is going to become more than an average clinician.
He really sells himself short.
No, there's hope for you. Yeah. With the technology.
Yeah, I go back to optometry.
No, but this was pretty thorough. We appreciate you being here today.
No, thank you.
It meant a lot to get you in and dig down deeper and deeper. And then this is also something that's changing real fast. So perhaps we can do one of these updates to help push forward on social media, the agenda as we get closer and closer to being able to launch something like this into our profession.
Yeah. And it's to your point, every 6 months, something's happening and major shifts. And I think we're seeing that, even with, in technology overall. So what might have been cool technology and proprietary technology 2 years ago, we could build that now in 2 weeks, right? So I would love to come back in when there's another major milestone. Maybe that's after us attending the next Alliance meeting.
Sure.
Maybe if it's if CLARE gets approved, maybe that's a conversation we have. But the message I want to give to the clinicians that are out there right now is when you're taking a look at your practice and you're taking a look at instrumentation, don't look at it like you're buying furniture at this point. We have to start thinking about laying the foundation. So for us and for me personally, if I'm going to do AI, I want to be ready for this stuff. The hardware has to be there. I like robotic, one touch, consistent capture. You don't have to worry about, good data input versus bad data input because it's not operator dependent. So that is the core DNA of Topcon. That is why the AI developers are choosing Topcon to get their AI models across the finish line. So again, not an infomercial, but I'm just kind of sharing the facts about it. Second thing is once you get that layer, then it is start experimenting with, the data management platform. We have Harmony. We might want to determine what is it like, start educating yourself. So when something like CLARE comes out, or you want to run a bio age on this, now all of a sudden you're ready to go. You can start to hit the ground running. And those early adopters generally are the ones that benefit the most.
And what can you tell the audience about what next convention they're at? They should stop by the TopCon booth, and what are some of the things they should be looking for?
Yeah, we're here, obviously at the AOA will be, I'm just trying to think, we kind of go in the summer, so things sort of cool down a bit. I think the American Academy of Ophthalmology will be there. Trying to think,
And the Academy of Optometry.
in Anaheim,
Yeah,
for sure. We will be there as well in full
Great.
force. Yeah, we'd love for you to stop by the booth.
Yeah, great.
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for your time.
All right.
Thanks for your insights here, Alan, and to all our viewers with Eye.Talk.Tech here. Anything you guys want to see from the show on the platform, we really want to provide value for you guys, and so we certainly are open to hearing your thoughts that way. I hope this provided value as much as it did for me. Sydney, or nice to you two gentlemen. I hope that value is passed on to our listeners. Thank you guys very
Thanks for
much.
joining.
And we appreciate you, Griff. Thanks.
Yeah.